Hello everybody and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you for joining me for part 3 of our little discussion surrounding Lindon in general. And if you guys haven't seen the other 2 videos, there are a little bit of concerns about elves and certain matchups with Lindon, but Lindon is also considered one of the stronger factions in the game at the moment by many of the players. So I have had a few requests to do like a series of battles on how you could potentially defeat Lindon. So my opponent today is going to be Starling, who is one of the more veteran players in the Discord. He's been around for basically ever, and he's also one of our testers as well, obviously. And yeah, he definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to playing Lindon. Knows their strengths and weaknesses and things like that. So we're going to be playing against him, and I'm going to be playing as Rhudaur. So without any further ado, let's get into the army comps, and then we can get into the replay itself. I hope you guys enjoy it. So naturally, the first army we're going to look at today are the forces of Rhudaur, being commanded by yours truly. I have brought 6 units of Rhudaur swordsmen, and I believe 5 of them have an armor upgrade on top of their normal base armor of, I believe, about 3. Over here I've got a couple units of Rhudaur troll hunters. It's going to be very important in this particular matchup. I've also got 2 units of Rhudaur javelins. Now, a note on this is that Rhudaur has changed a tiny bit in the most recent hotfix, so you're only going to be able to take a 1 unit of Rhudaur javelin. So you can swap this out if you're facing Lindon, for example. You can swap this out with the unit of the Rhudaur, or the troll shot axemen, that's what they're called, who are just throwing axemen. So you can replace this with any other javelin unit that Lindon has. You can even bring some of the berserkers, for example, although you will pay for that just a little bit more. But in any case, I've also got 3 units here of the Dunman Spears. They're going to be forming part of my front line, and their shield wall is going to make them extremely useful for trying to push their way through Lindon's pike formations. I've also got a couple units of Rhudaur clansmen. These are my reserve companies of spearmen. They're going to be hanging out on my wings, on my second, I guess my 3rd line, in a lot of ways. And yeah, of course, I've got some cavalry over here on the wings. So I've got 2 units of Coldfell Maidens, who are very, very good. They are spear-armed cavalry, but they're also jav-cav, so a decent answer to other factions' cavalry. They probably won't win a whole lot of fights head-on, but given their numbers and their javelins, they can do a serious amount of damage to important enemy assets, and that's really why they're here. I've also brought a couple units of Rhudaur scouts as well. They're going to be behind my my ladies here, my Coldfell Maidens, because these guys are a lot more squishy. They are significantly squishier than the Coldfell Maidens, who have nicer armor and shield values to boot. Over here in the center, I've got a unit of Rhudaur Nobles, who are in terms of the knights, they have the least amount of armor and least amount of melee defense, I believe, but they are AP in melee, having maces that they wield in close combat. So when it comes to smashing your way through heavily armored cavalry, these guys can still trade relatively evenly with other knight units in the game, and of course they do a lot of work against non-HP cavalry as well, as you would expect. And over here on my other side, of course, I've got my combination here, this winning combination of Coldfell Maidens and some Rhudaur scouts to back that up. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's see what my opponent has brought to the battle today. Across the field, we have the forces of Starling, who is going to be commanding the Havens of Lindon. I don't know, the former kingdom of Lindon. He's got a unit here of the Rhudaur Horse Lords, which are a nice answer to my Rhudaur Rhudaur Knights. And the Rhudaur Horse Lords, I believe, have about 9 armor, so they've got a little bit more than my Knights do, but they don't have a shield value. So yeah, a little bit of a trade-off there. But naturally, they have the bonus versus cavalry and the HP that you would expect from a knight unit. Now over here, Starling's front line is comparatively small. That's because he has a lot of elite units. He's got 3 units here of Lindon pikemen, backed up by, I believe, 3 units of Lindon Marines. And out in front, he's got 3 units of the famous Lindon Guard, who I'm sure you guys are very much familiar with at this point. He's also got a couple units over here of Wardens of Lindon. And he's also got some hidden units, I believe 2 units of the Wardens of Elastirion, 1 on either flank. And last, but certainly not least, he's got a very deadly shock unit here. These are the Rhudaur Blade Masters, who have, I believe, 8 armor, 2 HP, and a boatload of damage that they can do in close quarters with those vicious 2-handed curved blades that they have. So it's a smaller force, and one that really relies very much on missile damage. He wants to be able to pepper me down because obviously Rhudaur does not have a whole lot of well-armored units. I think my best armored units are probably my are they Rhudaur Troll Hunters? Yes, they are. The Rhudaur Troll Hunters, who have decent armor and a good shield value to boot. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get into the battle. Now, as you guys probably noticed from my army composition, this army is pure rush. There are no long-range skirmishers here whatsoever. I have eschewed them completely in favor of an army that has a balance between spearmen and swordsmen. The spearmen are there to muscle their way through enemy formations, and the swordsmen are there to follow that up and consolidate any gains that they may make. And it's going to be all about using my javelins to try and destroy the lightly armored and low number elves. A war of attrition is not one that any of the elven factions can usually win with any reliability, so I want to try and use that to my advantage. Now, Starland's going to begin to open fire here. Some of his Wardens of Elastiri, and he sees that huge number of Rhudaur warriors rushing towards his comparatively tiny Lindon phalanx, and this is going to be it's going to be a desperate struggle here to try and deal as much damage to important assets of mine before my forces can manage to reach the Lindon lines. But the big advantage of this kind of build versus Lindon is that unless they're taking a decent amount of numbers to try and counter you, then they're, even if they destroy the majority of my javelin units, for example, I've still got all this infantry, I've got all of that cavalry. This is not an easy force for Lindon to fight. So this is just one example of how you can potentially overcome Lindon, just by kind of making an army comp that accentuates their weaknesses and doesn't give them a whole lot of options in terms of using their strengths against you. So over on this end, you can see my Rhudaur scouts charging headlong into the Wardens of Elastirion. Honestly, they're just here to occupy those archers for a little bit, give my forces a bit of a break, while the rest of my army moves in and gets ready to assault the Lindon phalanx formation. Over here, I'm going to follow up that charge here with an attack from my Rhudaur nobles, and they're going to be charging headlong into the Noldoran horse lords, who are also simultaneously being peppered down by my Coldfell maidens. Over on this end, I've actually kind of lost micro on my cav a little bit here. They're just kind of sitting out in the open, getting potentially shot down here. Tossing some of their javelins into the Wardens of Harlandon, but that is entirely accidental, I assure you. They just happen to be close enough to do so. But over here, my Rhudaur scouts look like they were going for a nice charge against the Wardens of Harlandon, but unfortunately I didn't really have the micro here to manage everything at once, because as you can see, my main line is also going toe-to-toe here with the 4 Lindon pikemen, who are at an extreme disadvantage in terms of numbers. And you can see that here, a very devastating charge into the 4 Lindon pikemen. My Rhudaur swordsmen have actually managed to get in there and do a lot of damage without being kept at bay from those pikes. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the javelin fire. Some of my javelins were tossing into the 4 Lindon pikemen. Others are now tossing their payloads into the Harlandon guard. And those trollmen javelins, which they will be losing, by the way, they're going to get their own javelin type, especially the Rhudaur. But yeah, the disruption that those javelins are causing right now is really helping me keep my main line intact. Yeah, now you can see he's moving in with some of his own jabbies to try and counter mine, but a very quick volley there from my javelin men is going to basically knock most of that unit over, which is going to be a difficult thing for them to have to deal with. Over on this end, Noldoran Blade Masters being committed to the fight against my Dunman Spearmen. That is a fight that they will win very, very handily. However, I still have a couple units of my javelins nearby, and I'm going to start to position them in a pretty good spot into a good area where they can put a lot of enfilading pressure along the axis of this unit of Noldoran Blade Masters. But we'll come back to that in a second. Over on this end, you can see that I followed up with a unit of my reserve Rhudaur swordsmen. I had 5 of them on my front line and 1 unit in reserve, and now they are holding down the Wardens of Elastirion as they got hammered and anviled by my Rhudaur scouts. My Rhudaur scouts are going to die completely, thanks to the Noldoran horse lords, but honestly, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. Over here, my Coldfell maidens still tossing their javies at both the horse lords and the Wardens of Elastirion, and meanwhile, I've pulled back with my Rhudaur nobles. They took some pretty heavy casualties fighting the Noldoran horse lords, but that is to be expected. And I pulled them out of there, and now these guys are in a position of strength, whereas previously the Noldoran horse lords had the advantage. But the Noldoran horse lords have been fighting for a lot longer, and they've taken more damage. So now's a good time to move in with my Rhudaur nobles. Over on this end, pop back over to see the Noldoran Blade Masters getting destroyed by some focus fire from 2 units of Ferrondrim javelins. That's going to be that's a big deal. There's a lot of money tied up in units like the Noldoran Blade Masters and the Noldoran Horse Lords. They're like 1,200 and 1,300 respectively. So to lose them like this without getting a lot of value for your investment is a pretty serious defeat for the forces of Lindon. Over on this end, looks like my cavalry now pulling back. They kind of got themselves stuck in on the 4 Lindon Marines long enough for my Rhudaur swordsmen to move in and then silence this unit of javelin. So we've effectively... Starling has had to fall back on his 4 Lindon Marines to try and plug gaps in his lines instead of using them as the javelin men that he really intended them to be, to try and thin out some of my massive numbers. So let's go ahead and kick it up to full speed here. You can see some breaking over on the Lindon right. So my Rhudaur warriors victorious going to surge through that gap and begin to put some pressure on the back lines here. The Harlandon Guard have fallen back and taken a fair amount of casualties. One of those units still looking pretty good. But you can see Starling just generally trying to fall back behind the protective phalanxes of his 4 Lindon pikemen, looking to make a last stand here. What's he shooting at? Looks like he's shooting... Yeah, he's still directly shooting at my Rhudaur troll hunters and things like that. So my very important assets, like my javelins, who are very much the crux of this army. Wow, those torches floating around is really strange. Hopefully we fix that for the patch release. But at this point, the damage has been done. My javelins have destroyed important pieces of his army, and there's really no coming back from that at this point. Charge here from the Rhudaur scouts straight through our lines into the rear of the Wardens of Elastirion. Again, I'm just throwing these guys under the bus because I want them to keep those archers busy. Over on this end, my Coldfell Maidens lost micro on them. Big mistake on my part. They're just getting basically butchered by the Harlandon Guard. But it does have the advantage of distracting the Harlandon Guard from attacking my front line. So you can see my force is still very healthy, very, very numerous at this point. And there goes Círdan, cut down by my general's bodyguard. But I'm very numerous at this point. I'm just surging through the remains of his front line. I'm going to be able to get in here amongst the Harlandon Guard and the Wardens of Elastirion. That is going to be an admit defeat from Starling right there. So Starling did his best, and there's not a ton of mistakes, I think, that he made in this particular battle, except maybe allowing me to catch those Wardens of Elastirion out there on the flanks. I mean, having them behind the lines probably would have been a better idea. There's really no reason for them to be out there on those flanks. But otherwise, he didn't have a lot of choice in the way that he used his javelins, for example, because there's just so many of my men crushing his phalanxes that he has to have something to defend the flanks, and he doesn't really necessarily want to commit his Harlandon Guard to that kind of endeavor because they're not as suited to it, I think, as the 4 Lindon javelin men. The javelin men being just better spearmen in general. So it's a hard fight for Lindon when they're not expecting this kind of rush arming, and Starling definitely wasn't. He had a lot of range firepower. I think he was expecting me to try and skirmish with him, do like more of a traditional line battle, but yeah, the rush army definitely caught him off guard. But that's what rush armies are meant to do. Essentially, it is trying to catch your opponent off guard so that you can use your offensive power and your lack of defensive power in a lot of cases to overwhelm them before they even know it hit them. So that is definitely a tactic that you can use against Lindon, and I have noticed that pretty well generally Lindon can struggle against rush armies if they're not expecting it and they don't have the comp necessary to defeat one. And in this case, he did not have the comp necessary, but yeah, I've said everything that needs to be said there. It's meant to be a surprise and to catch people off guard. So yes, so one final note here. We've had like 3 videos now talking about Lindon. They are, and I've talked up and down about their changes at this point, so you guys know what those are, but I won't reiterate them. But basically, Lindon is, they are going to be an interesting faction, and it's still going to be very much about combined arms, and I think that they are going to be one of the harder Elven factions to play, in the sense that you have a fair amount of vulnerabilities, and you need to be able to compensate for those vulnerabilities with a clear plan in mind, essentially. If you're going to be fighting against the Woodland Realm after the next hotfix, when we fix everybody's accuracy and things like that, you're going to need to bring the right comp. You're going to need to bring your Harlandon Guard, who are getting some more shield value. They're not going to have the same range, though, so you're going to have to be a little bit more proactive, whereas in other instances, you're going to have to maybe fall back a little bit more on your 4 Lindon archers, who have the extra range and the extra ammunition, but they've got a little bit less accuracy to kind of compensate for that. So there are trade-offs, and when it comes to Lindon, I think army composition is probably going to be the most important thing. There's not necessarily a catch-all in the same way that maybe the High Elves will have, like with their rush armies, for example. Their rush armies are generally very strong, and a lot of that comes down to their cavalry. But Lindon has to pay a little bit more attention to their army comp, and be very, very careful with how they lose their units, because it can be punishing when they're so lightly armored. But yeah, in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye!